villa. The villa was a apartment building, 36 units, down in North Portland, and it was built in 1928. Roaches, rats, mice. You could hear the mice running up over your head because it was just filthy. But I needed a job. I had no place to live, no money, no job. I was highly unemployable at the time, and with Billy Idol hair when I had hair, so it was like somebody hit me with an egg beater. I was very unemployable, but I could be an apartment manager because they needed somebody as dumb as me to live in this squalor and repaint and clean and do the booklet of code violations was that thick. And the original owner, lived up the street, knew my stepdad. He thought, oh yeah, you're from our area, this will be great. I had to evict forcibly at least a dozen people who were camping out there. Some at gunpoint. I just wore a 45 and a shoulder holster and some of my Road Warrior, my gear, so I looked like Mad Max when I vacuumed the hallways at this place. I heard them plotting to rip me off once, and so I busted the door down. I didn't open it. I just kicked it through because I had an extra one. I said, excuse me, I can hear you talking, and what I did to your door is going to be nothing to what I'm going to do to your head if you want to try that. I'm always open for this. I like a little excitement. And I went and got a door, and replaced the lock, just like nothing happened. I guess I was a little bit nuts. The guy says, I'm not going to pay you all your money. You're $500 a month for working your ass off. And he said, I won't charge you for the apartment. Okay, and this guy was a skinflint. He'd sold the building to this old man that looked like Paul McCartney's grandfather in the movie Hard Day's Night. And he was a skinflint and a completely KKK racist. We had a lot of black people in here, and he just call him all kinds of stuff. You're gonna get those out of here. And one had some pet rats, and he went into the apartment and said they can't have these pet rats, and he chopped their heads off with a shovel. There, that'll fix them. Yeah, that sure did. Whew. But that was my 9 months of hell. But I learned how the other half lives, and I don't want to do that. It was like we put for rent signs up at the parole office, and so people would come. This is from the Villa. There's a song on the Dr. Mastermind record called The Villa. And he went down to the parole office and put for rent signs up, so we had everybody that was out of prison coming to rent at our place, $150 a month for a one-bedroom, for a studio. And Johnny Milligan, Mexican Johnny, he had smashed a guy over the head with a half-gallon bottle and then ran over his head with his car. He just popped his skull, and he did 1.5 years for that. And he got out, and he was the one that was, he was dope man, and he's white, he's mixed white and Mexican, and they just called him Mexican Johnny. Another guy, Detroit Ed, and everybody there that got out of jail was selling drugs. Then they started making speed in one of the apartments, and I called up the cops because I didn't want to go to jail for letting this happen. I said, there's a crank lab in one of the apartments, and the guy's on parole for murder. One time, we're having a party. Somebody's got a couple kegs going, and I was drinking beer by the gallon water, the water thing, because the water sucked, so you couldn't drink the water there or eat anything in the place. I wouldn't, and so we bought bottled water. So I had an empty gallon jug, and I'd fill that up, and I was drinking out of that. After a few of those, this guy, there's a mixed couple, black guy, white woman, and this guy's sister was the girl, and he's mixed. And he said, I don't want you going out with Vernon. And he was high on something, and he lived with this midget cripple. I'm not making any of this shit up. There was a crippled midget who had a broken femur, the bone up in your thigh, and so she was in bed, and she had a roommate that was just big and ugly as sin, but they would lure guys off the street to come up and have sex with them. They'd call the phone booth at the corner and say, "You want to come up and have sex?" And she told me this. She said, we get guys coming down, walking down the street, and so if you ever hear Indian Nation, the song by the singer Mark Lindsay from Paul Revere and the Raiders, if you hear that really loud, that's what's going on. And then the bed would go bam, bam, bam. They're right up. They lived right above me. It was pretty hilarious. So back to the story here. Vernon, he says he knocks. I watched this because I was coming back up for more beer. I lived in the basement part of the street level apartments, and there was 2 floors up. Said, "You better go back or I'm going to knock you out." And he said, "Well, you better come on, I don't want to do this. Just go back, mellow out." And so Vernon, he said, "Go ahead and hit me." He goes, "Well, you asked for it." And this dude just launched into him like no tomorrow, and the other guy didn't do much. I saw a lot of that stuff there. It was crazy. I mean, it really was crazy. And this gets crazier. So he goes, "Now go home." He goes, "Or I'm going to hit you again. You hit me again, I'm going to get a gun and shoot you." And I knew this woman that they lived with, the big ugly woman with the Indian Nation record. She had a Luger, and I helped load it for the crippled woman who would watch her have the sex. It's crazy. So he punches him, and he goes and he gets a gun, and I go down and tell my wife, "Call the cops, because shit's going to go down here." And we pass each other on the stairway, and I said, "Look," and he's pointing the gun at me. I said, "Don't point that gun at me, because I'm going to point." When I pointed mine back at him, I said, "If you shoot me, I'm going to shoot you, and we don't need any of this stuff here, okay?" He goes, "It's not even loaded." I said, "I know it's loaded because I loaded it 2 days ago for whatever her name was. And it's got a really easy trigger. It's old. It was an old Luger." Finally, the cops, I'm there for like 20 minutes talking to this guy, and I'm having him point the gun, on my other side. I told him, I said, "Don't shoot me, but go ahead and pull that trigger and shoot the wall." He shot the wall, and it's, "Oh my God." I go, "See, it's loaded." Then he started freaking out. I said, "Don't freak out. Just give me the gun and go away." So I got the gun, took it back to the person, and people are watching by this time. The SWAT team is amassing outside, and little did I know this, but Mexican Johnny had gotten, somebody gave him a hot shot, bad dope, they guys shooting drugs, and he had to go to the hospital. So he went to the hospital, and he had lots of money. He had a whole briefcase full of money, handcuffed to his wrist with bills sticking out of it. I saw this later. He says he saw the cops, pulled down the fire escape, went up to the 3rd floor, that's where he lived, with his briefcase after the hospital trip, watching the cops all line up, wondering what's going on. He thinks they're going to his house. And no, they show up, and the guy that got the worst of it was me. The main copper just gave me the smackdown for doing anything. I said, "Well, it's like 40 minutes later. So if anything would have happened, I would have been calling an ambulance, and you guys would have been stopping that." It was crazy. Now there's a little lady named Helen at the villa. And Helen had lived there as a child with her mother, who moved in when the building first opened in 1928. It was right by the railroad, so a lot of people that worked the railroad lived in these apartments when they were in Portland. They went from Portland to Chicago. The White Eagle Tavern and brothel across the street back then, and it's owned by McMinimans, which that's a brew pub. They started off as a brew pub. Now they bought up all these old places and fancy them up. They're great. But she wanted me to come in to do something for her, look at her sink or something. And I'd never been into her house. She'd always come down. She was very lonely. Her family was really nasty to her. And she had one eye that was like fixed, so it was blind, I'm sure. She couldn't see, and it didn't move. and she had a big hooked nose, and so I go up to her apartment. I go in, and it's like walking into a twilight zone, where everything is exactly the way it was, like whenever the first TVs came out, like 1950. Those little round oval TVs, and the chairs, the furniture was the same, and it smelled like somebody had died in there. And I noticed she had a really bad odor. And what the deal was, now that I know better, she was afraid to take a bath. Actually, I think what happened was somebody had drowned. I think her mom drowned or somebody drowned. It was kind of a haunty tale, but she wouldn't get in the bathtub. I called the Urban League, and this nice black woman came, and Helen was white, and she was terrified of black people. And I don't know why, but she went screaming down to me, "There's somebody in my house." I said, "I know." I called him. "Don't help me like this." And I could go on and on and on and on. And this one guy, the woo-woo, boy, what was his name? He was a high-ranking naval guy, and he was in Vietnam, and he looked like Kelsey Grammer, complete with a really nice suit. And this is the first guy I met when I got to the villa, and the owner said, "Hey, Matt, would you come by, pick up the keys, and go over and let this guy in? He's been sitting on the steps since last night, after the bars closed, I assume, and he can't get in." So I went over there, and here's this guy dressed like it looked like a high-priced lawyer. Well, he had Agent Orange syndrome and schizophrenia, so he was in a completely different reality, but he was also coherent. It was the weirdest thing, man. I never knew any people like this. It was a great, learning experience. So I let him in, and then every once in a while he'd come, "Hey, my truck ran out of gas on the railroad tracks down at the Union Pacific yard right down the street. Could you help me give it a push?" So we go down there and push it off the railroad tracks just right before, as the train's about to come. And another friend of mine, Richard Carter, who was a sound guy with us in the Ravers, and then Rude Awakening, we used to play in his basement. We were famous for these parties right up the street from the Memorial Coliseum. We'd have parties after concerts, and people would flood there. His family were janitors, so they'd leave at 10 o'clock and wouldn't be back till like 9 in the morning. So we had parties every weekend there. Well, Richard Carter that's how I figured out I could be an apartment manager, because if this guy can do it, any loser can. And he had a place called the Melwana Motel that he was managing, and all the units had their own heat and hot water and electricity. It was all included in their price. I went into Dennis Dyer. His name was Dennis. I went to the woo-woo's room, and I said, "Hey, I got my friend," because he didn't believe in turning on the heat or the electricity. So he had icicles coming off his pipes. It was freezing winter, and the windows were really thin, so you might as well have them open. And he's got piles of quarters and papers everywhere on the floor. And I said, "Look, you could just leave. I'll take your quarters and just leave, and I'll get you a deal down here where it's going to be warm." "No, I can't leave all these things. There's people in each one of these papers." And so we packed up 5 garbage bags full of this shit, and he moved with him. But for that hour that I was up there, he told me he was the woo-woo, the child of man, that somebody had thrown a piece of obsidian rock into a pile of shit, camel dung, and that's how he was born, and all this stuff, and the weird part was some of it made sense. And so that was another, we got freaky guys. And then there's a core group of like 6 people who'd been there for, 40 years. And a bunch of the other ones were just out of jail, and it was nuts. the villa, the house where evil dwells. But it's also where I met my good friend Jerry Cottrell. And Jerry had a roommate named Clyde Randall, who was a real sweetheart. And he had a really bad go of it with his life and stuff, man. He died young. I don't think he made 30. Last time I saw him, it was in a parking lot, and he just looked really bad, drugged out, and he was a sweetheart, but he'd been abused and pimped out, and his mom worked at bars, so he slept on the pool table, and like the I-5 killer was his mom's boyfriend for a while, and so on the Mastermind cover, there's two guys in masks, and that's Jerry and Clyde, and Jerry, boy, I'm still friends with him. That was a long time ago, but the villa was a pretty crazy place, and I'm glad to leave. So when I left, I made up the difference from the money that the guy was going to pay me, my $500 a month. That's big time. That's for my wife and me, but Angie wouldn't do anything. She wouldn't even leave that. She never left the apartment. He's going to pay me $150 and not charge me rent. It's like, I wouldn't live here unless I was getting paid. So I never listen to your wife when she says, well, just take it out. We're just going to take that out of the rent. I told him, well, I'll take it out of the rent and make it up. He said, if you do that, you'll be sorry. I did, and I was. So got to go to court, got to be a felon with a theft 2 rap, man. And pay back $1,000 on like the $300 I took. It was really stupid. The day I paid that off, I decided to celebrate. Well, actually, I wasn't deciding to celebrate. I went up to Hillsdale for some reason, and I saw Andre Edmonds, the owner of Poncho's, the Mexican restaurant my mom worked at. And he's like, a couple years older than me, 2 years. Hey, Matt, come in and have a drink. I found out later he was going in there and getting tanked up. His mom was still alive then, and she was actually the owner. So that started me off, and I bought 1 pint of vodka. Then I had to go to the store for my Aunt Catherine, and I bought another 1, another 2. I ended up drinking 5 pints of vodka that day and driving around doing errands. And I lived in a warehouse at the time, over on 8th and Hawthorne, top floor, 10,000 square feet, quarter block. I paid $500, seems to be the number. $500 a month for this place, and we had concerts and practice places and big PA and decent lights. It was a nice little thing and a place to live in there. And so I kind of trashed that when I got home because, the future ex-wife was down on my case. And she was making chili, and we needed some beer for chili. I think she was more pissed that I didn't share with her. And so she took the keys. I figured out where the keys were, and I took the anal intruders, what the car was called. It had a sticker on it. Was that somebody put that on there because it had a dent in the back. And I'm going to drive to Safeway, which is about 20 blocks up. Instead of walking 2 blocks down the street to the convenience store, I'm going to go to the big Safeway store with tons of people driving. And I was like shit-faced. I blew a 2.0 at this cop shop. So I must have been kind of nasty to somebody when I went into the store or something. And I go into the store and I buy a quart of beer with my last $2 and go out, leave the parking lot, and the police are waiting for me. And they pull me over, and I thought, well, this is it. And they said, I don't know how I remember this, but maybe it made an impression on me. Well, it smells like a brewery in here. I said, let me correct you, officer. It's more like a distillery because I've been drinking vodka, not beer. Well, how much have you had? I said, way too much to be driving, to be honest with you. I said, so let's just cut. I'm not going to lie to you. Let's just cut to the chase. You got me. I'm done. I'm looking at it. I'm thinking, this is going to be a relief because now I can stop drinking. That's the only thing my ex-wife and I did. We drink and drive, really. Short case of beer and just drive around or just drink all the time. And I don't really like drinking then, and I was kind of had a lot of issues that needed to be resolved, and it wasn't a good combination. If I hit a certain point, I would be kind of angry. And so they take me out. I go, do I get to do the walk now? And they make me do this, walk heel to toe. Ooh. And I'm failing pretty miserably. And they said, okay, get in the car. They tow my car. They take me to the cop shop. And I'm not causing them any problems, so they're not going to shoot me. And Portland's famous for that, So they have me walk the line again before they take my breathalyzer. And I'm up there, and I thought, Olga Corbett is back in the Olympics on the balance beam. I'm Howard Cosell. She's looking a little bit heavier than the last games. Let's see how she does. Oh, and the cops were laughing. I was leaning so far over that he said, I don't know how you didn't fall. It was like my feet were glued to the line. And so didn't do well on that test. So then I blew into a breathalyzer, and I blew 2.0 6 hours after my last drink. And he said, wow. He said, so now what happens? Well, I'm going to give you this ticket. A ticket? And you have to go to court and just, follow all the things. Okay. And, all right, fine. He said, well, we're not going to keep you. You're not going to, most people that are this intoxicated are a big problem for us. We have to restrain them. Well, I have no friends to call. You have a lot of them here. I lose by default, and what's the point? I'm gonna be hurting tomorrow anyway. And they were pretty funny. Then I said, well, he goes, so you're free to go? And I said, well, you took my car. I can't drive home, and we're like 40 blocks and 5 streets over from where I live. Can I get a lift home? I said, I spent my last money on the beer that's in the car that you towed. And so one officer was in the room. He said, where do you live? I said, 8th and Hawthorne. 8th and Hawthorne? I said, it's a warehouse. I rent the top floor, and I have an apartment in there. And, oh, a place that has the music. And I said, yeah. He goes, oh, I know where you're talking about. And he said, hey, I'm going downtown. The cop shop is just across the bridge. And so he said, he took me. I said, can I ride up front? No. I said, I won't puke. He said, no, get in the back. I said, okay, thank you very much, Charles. And then I'm like being funny, like, wow, the accommodations. I'm never going to call this limo service again. So he's cracking up and saying, I'm sorry this had to happen this way. I said, well, on one hand I am. On the other hand, I'm looking at it as a positive thing because things are going to change. I didn't want to be married. I really didn't like my wife. The whole time I was married, I was like, I'd been with 800 different women that I'd met on the street. Let's just put it that way. Everywhere I went, they were all over the place. I kind of had a problem with it. I was making up for groupie time. Plus, I really just never said how I felt. And so it all came out in different ways. And usually it came out the end of that thing, I'll get you back. But so after a little diversion, some counseling, AA meetings, and the guy that took me to my first AA meeting was the drummer on Louie Louie with the Kingsmen, Lynn. Well, I don't know his last name. Lynn Eastman, that's it. And so I was going to meetings quite a bit. It really helped out. So if you One thing I couldn't do was say no, and I couldn't say how I really felt about anything because I was afraid of somebody not accepting me. Plus, I was pretty messed up about the wild dogs thing. I mean, I'm pissed off more than anything else, and that anger, it will fester up in you and ruin you. And maybe that was their plan, you know, who knows. But I'm different now, I'm much more boring, but I remember all the words. And in fact, we had a reunion, a Wild Dogs reunion, on January 5th, 1990, at my warehouse. And for the first time, I was sober, and I was scared shitless to go out there in my place and sing songs that I'd done forever. Dean was having a break from bad English. He was with them at the time. And then that started another round of Wild Dogs, 90s. We decided to Jeff had gotten a replacement for Dean after I had took him. And Tom Mueller was the Swedish model-looking drummer, and he was pretty good, but boy, you know, there's some guys who just do. He has to think about everything for like, well, I don't know. And he says, I don't know, like 12,000 times. I don't know. Just try it. Well, I don't know. You'll know if you try it. And he's a good guy, good drummer. We ended up playing Seattle, and mainly Seattle and Tacoma and that area quite a bit with Glenn Huttenlocker, who owns and started Music Lord Amplifiers in Kent, Washington. So he booked us a lot up there, Brad Butler. And that was the next thing, you know, and then we were doing more recordings, and that's how I ended up recording a lot of stuff that throughout the 90s. And somehow Jeff and I had another blowout, and I didn't talk to him, and Johnny Limbo and the Lugnuts needed a production manager, stage manager, road manager, and I said, I'm the guy, let's do this. And he said, well, Jeff's on the crew. Jeff Horton? Yeah. I can get along with Jeff. It's not a band thing. You see, they didn't just do this to me 2 times. Jeff has done the sneaky weasel to me 3 times. Am I dumb? Yeah, maybe I'm just forgiving. And we were in a cover band called Shock Treatment. We played all 90s and just crap music, but I never made money playing in a band ever on a regular basis, so I made my $50 a night. Why those guys made like 100 or more, and I found out later. Well, we were schlepping around all these clubs, and I didn't drink, so the owners didn't like us because the other guys that drank, they give them their bar tab at the end of the week and end up taking $500 off the top just for what they consumed. So I get a call from Sunshine, and his name's Connie Shine. He was the light guy for Johnny Limbo and the Lugnuts. It turns out later, this right now he's working for his band Hotshot. He said, hey, why don't you come and play bass with us, man? We got a bus, we got gigs, we get paid better than you guys do, and we travel all over the place. And I said, well, no, I got a gig. And he said, well, no, you don't, buddy. And I said, what do you mean, no, I don't? I said, well, didn't they tell you? Oh, God, there's those words again. I said, tell me what? He said, no, Mark Hannaford, they've been jamming and practicing with him for like a month and a half. I said, oh, so why do you think he was always at all of your last gigs and when they were local? I said, oh, you like the band? No. So I had rented a car, had no money. I'm with Debbie at this time, by this time, 93. And we rented a car to go to, where was this? Eugene. And, I mean, I had no cash at the time. So, and then I called Jeff up and he goes, I want to talk about it. Well, what do you mean I want to talk about it? I just got a call, and so is this? Yeah, that's the deal. Well, fuck off. I got to go. I got to play at the KGON party with Rising Tide. Well, fuck you, man. Double fuck you. So that was the big blowout with Jeff, and it's like, nah. I ended up working with him for a couple of years with Johnny Limbo and the Lugnuts in 98 to 2000. And, it was all right. Kept saying we should put the records out, man. We should re-release these. No, we can get a major label deal to put. We can get a major label to put these things out. These are classics. Nobody did what we did. And I'm thinking, where? What? Bullshit, man. We're one little band that was together for like 3 years, and thanks to for keeping it alive for all you people out there. But yeah, I think I'm all done with this. So that's the deal. I didn't really care if they were going to get rid of me at all. It's like, I'll go find something else to do. There's always another couple of bands. Gargoyle wanted me to sing with them. Mayhem did. And I could have found another gig that with more compatible people. It's just the way they did it, with the lying and underhanded bullshit, which just pisses me off. And there's a reason for that. My mother did that to me. I had a German Shepherd dog, and had a German Shepherd, and it was my best friend. And she was working, and I was with that dog all the time. Well, I come home one day, and the phone rings, and the guy says, "I'm calling about the dog you're giving away." It's like, what dog? The German Shepherd. And it's like, we're not giving it. Well, there's an ad in the paper. It's like, huh? Oh, fuck, man. See, these are some of the issues. But my mom did that with me with, like, didn't want to tell me because it might make me mad. And then I, just get angry enough to be a terrorist in the house. Did that going to the doctors. It's like, well, no, let's go out to dinner. Okay, we go out to dinner. Well, why are we stopping here? Well, we just have to go in for a second. Why? For a shot. It's like, fuck.